Buried beneath decades of dust, secrecy, and forgotten history lies a hidden world of abandoned Nazi technology and vehicles that defies belief. From bizarre flying saucers and stealth aircraft to massive land cruisers and mysterious energy weapons, these inventions seemed ripped straight from science fiction, but they were real. As the Third Reich crumbled, many of these machines vanished into the shadows, hidden in bunkers or left to rot in remote forests. Today, we're uncovering the most unbelievable Nazi creations that history tried to erase, and the shocking truth behind them. Number 20. The Silbervogel. Have you ever imagined a bomber so advanced it could take off from Europe, fly along the edge of space, strike New York, and then land in Japan, all without ever touching land in between? That was the vision behind Silbervogel, or Silverbird, an audacious Nazi blueprint from the Second World War that seemed more like science fiction than military strategy. Conceived by Austrian aerospace genius Eugen Zenger and physicist Irene Brett, the plan called for a rocket-powered sled to launch a sleek, space-skimming aircraft into suborbital flight. It was supposed to leapfrog across the atmosphere in massive ballistic arcs, making it nearly impossible to intercept. The concept was undeniably bold, but its execution quickly unraveled. The physics of atmospheric re-entry was poorly understood. The aircraft's wings couldn't withstand the anticipated speeds, and the initial design spanned over 900 pages. Far too complex and costly. Even when simplified in 1944, Nazi command had already lost interest as the war slipped away. After the war, Zenger and Brett escaped to France, becoming targets of Soviet abduction attempts. Even the US echoed their design decades later in the X-20 Dinosaur. But in the end, Silverbird never took flight, leaving behind only blueprints, ambition, and the haunting echo of what could have been. But what if Hitler's wildest flight experiments never died? Some failed, others fly today in modern war zones. Stay tuned. This gets stranger. Number 19. Me-163 Comet. Messerschmitt Me-163. Comet was one of Nazi Germany's most radical experiments, an aircraft unlike anything the world had seen. It was the first operational rocket-powered fighter, built not just for speed, but for pure vertical aggression. Soaring through the sky at blistering velocity that could exceed 1,000 kilometers per hour, it was designed to punch through bomber formations before they could react. But beneath its sleek, futuristic shape was a machine plagued by danger and impossible risks. Fueled by a mix of hyper-reactive chemicals, the Comet was lethal even before takeoff. Ground crews risked death every time they prepared it for flight. A single mistake could trigger a catastrophic explosion. Pilots trained for combat had to first survive the fueling process, and even then, flying the Comet was far from safe. Its power lasted mere minutes. Once in the air, it had only enough fuel for a single attack run. After that, pilots had to glide back down using a simple landing skid, often overshooting runways or crashing on impact. Its wooden wings were another weak point, easily damaged, even prone to breaking apart mid-air. Though revolutionary in theory, the Me-163 proved too unstable for sustained use. As the war ended, more reliable jet aircraft, like the Me-262, left the Comet behind, an extraordinary risk, with too little reward. Number 18. Sturmtiger. Sturmtiger was one of Nazi Germany's strangest and most extreme battlefield inventions, less a tank and more a mobile fortress built for destruction at close range. Mounted on the powerful Tiger I chassis and armored like a bunker, it carried a gigantic 380mm rocket mortar capable of firing explosive shells originally designed for naval depth charges. Each round was a towering force of devastation, but while its presence was terrifying, its usefulness was far more limited. Heavy, jigsaw, and awkward to maneuver, the Sturmtiger weighed nearly 68 tons and carried only 14 rounds. Its massive rockets had poor range and dreadful accuracy, making each shot a gamble. Reloading was a slow and dangerous task, and the vehicle's bulk often made it more of a target than a solution. By 1945, with Germany on the brink of collapse, the Sturmtiger was thrown into battle in acts of desperation. At Düren, it briefly showed its power, destroying several American tanks in one strike. But during the defense of the Ludendorff Bridge at Remagen, it failed to stop the Allied advance. In another mission at Drolshagen, one broke a track and was abandoned by its crew under fire. Despite its raw power, the Sturmtiger proved too flawed, too late, and too few to turn the tide of war. Today, only two remain, silent giants standing as reminders of ambition outpaced by reality. Number 17. V-2 Rocket. The V-2 rocket was Nazi Germany's most advanced and terrifying invention, a weapon that struck without warning and defied the technology of its time. Capable of traveling faster than the speed of sound, it became the first man-made object to reach the edge of space in June 1944. Powered by a liquid-fueled engine and guided mid-flight, the V-2 marked a dangerous step toward modern missile warfare. Developed by Wernher von Braun and his team at the Peenemünde Research Center, the rocket was launched over 3,000 times against Allied cities like London, Antwerp, and Liège. Each explosion came with no siren, no defense, just sudden destruction. Despite its terrifying presence, the V-2 was often wildly inaccurate, frequently missing its target by miles. But the legacy didn't end with Germany's defeat. As the Third Reich collapsed, both the US and the Soviets raced to capture its top scientists and their revolutionary blueprints. Wernher von Braun and more than 100 engineers surrendered to American forces, laying the foundation for the US space program. Meanwhile, the Soviets scavenged what remained. Though the V-2 rocket was never launched again by Germany, it quietly became the backbone of the space age. But what would have happened if Nazi Germany had managed to place a weapon in orbit? Keep watching. Number 16. The Nazi Sun Gun. The sun gun sounds like something from a science fiction comic. But during Second World War, Nazi scientists seriously explored turning sunlight into a weapon. The idea, officially called the heliobeam, was to place a giant mirror in orbit, concentrating solar rays and directing them to scorch targets on Earth. It wasn't entirely new. Physicist Hermann Oberth had once imagined a 100-foot concave mirror reflecting intense sunlight from space. But it was Nazi engineers at Hillersleben who tried to take the fantasy further. Their proposal involved building a mirror roughly 3.5 square miles wide, made from metallic sodium, and mounted on a massive space station hovering 5,000 miles above Earth. They claimed the weapon could ignite entire cities, or even boil sections of the ocean. It was a vision of warfare so extreme, it bordered on apocalyptic. But reality had the final word. The technology for orbital stations didn't exist in the 1940s, and Germany's collapsing war effort had no room for sci-fi megaprojects. Captured scientists told American interrogators the sun gun might take a century to build. That was enough to bury the project for good. Number 15. Project Habach. Project Habach was one of the Second World War's boldest and most bizarre military ideas. A floating fortress made not of steel, but of ice. Conceived by British inventor Geoffrey Pike, it was more than just a fantasy. The idea was to create a massive aircraft carrier capable of patrolling the mid-Atlantic, far beyond the range of conventional support, using a revolutionary new material called picrete, a mix of ice and wood pulp that was tougher than concrete and far slower to melt than regular ice. This monstrous ship was planned to be over 2,000 feet long, big enough for heavy bombers to take off and land in the middle of the ocean. In theory, it would be nearly unsinkable and resistant to torpedoes, offering a mobile base where none existed. A prototype was built and floated on Patricia Lake in Alberta, Canada, during the harsh winter of 1944, and it worked. The structure held strong, surviving far longer than expected. Habach's promise crumbled fast. New tech made it obsolete, and keeping the ice ship frozen required more refrigeration steel than building an entire fleet, making the idea impractical before it ever left the drawing board. By the end of 1943, the project was shelved. The test model slowly melted over 3 summers, leaving behind no trace but water. As Habach faded, the Nazis built a weapon not to win, but to stall defeat. Stay tuned as this gets darker. Number 14. Bakemba 349, Natter, the wooden rocket that never stood a chance. The B-349 Natter wasn't built to win the war, it was built to delay the inevitable. As Allied bombers tore through German skies in 1945, the Nazis turned to desperate, unconventional solutions. One of the strangest was this tiny vertical launch interceptor, more missile than aircraft. Unlike traditional fighters, the Natter was designed to launch straight up from a ramp, fire a burst of rockets at enemy bombers, then let its pilot eject and parachute safely back to Earth. At least, that was the theory. Constructed mostly from wood and powered by a rocket engine, the Natter was cheap, fast to build, and brutally unstable. Its flight plan depended on perfect timing, mechanical precision, and pilot survival in a chaotic vertical ascent. The plan was bold, but the execution was fatal. On February 28, 1945, during the first and only manned test flight, Oberleutnant Lothar Siebert was killed just seconds after liftoff. The Natter lost control and crashed. Whether it was a loose canopy or failed guidance system, no one could say for sure. But the dream died instantly. Only a handful were ever built, and with Germany's defeat imminent, the project was abandoned. The BA-349 remains one of the war's most bizarre inventions, a wooden rocket fueled by fear, remembered only for a tragic attempt to rewrite the skies. Number 13. Die Glocke, the bell that time forgot. Some say Die Glocke never existed. Others believe that's exactly what was intended. A weapon so secret, it was buried beneath silence and speculation. Nicknamed the Bell, this mysterious Nazi project remains one of the Second World War's most baffling enigmas. Standing roughly 12 feet tall and 9 feet wide, the device was said to emit a strange blue glow and deadly radiation. Inside, two counter-rotating cylinders spun at terrifying speeds, containing a purplish liquid known only as Cerium-535, possibly a form of radioactive mercury. While no official documents confirm its purpose, theories swirled. Was it a failed experiment in anti-gravity propulsion, a crude time machine, or something far more dangerous? Witnesses claimed the device distorted time, bent gravity, and caused horrific effects on living subjects. Rumors even suggested that prisoners were exposed to the machine's deadly energy, many perishing without ever knowing what they were part of. As Allied forces advanced, Die Glocke mysteriously disappeared. Some claim it was taken by the Soviets. Others believe the Americans secured it through secret deals with fleeing Nazis. No physical trace has ever surfaced. Whether lost science or legend, its story remains, a haunting symbol of how ambition flirts with madness. Number 12. Nazi UFOs and the engine that defied physics. It sounds like science fiction, but deep within Nazi Germany's secret bunkers, engineers may have tried to rewrite the laws of motion itself. Tucked away in Austria's misty forests and hidden castles were blueprints so strange they bordered on the impossible. One of the most radical was the Repulsine, a disc-shaped engine designed not to burn fuel, but to harness the natural turbulence of air and water. Austrian inventor Victor Schoberger envisioned a propulsion system inspired by trout swimming upstream, silent, combustion-free, and capable of pulling aircraft forward with vortex energy. By the early 1930s, Schoberger had proposed what he called the Repulsine, a device that spun air into a vacuum-like chamber, creating lift through implosion rather than explosion. No fire, no noise, just raw atmospheric motion. Years later, under duress, he was forced into Nazi weapons research, where his ideas caught the attention of SS engineers. Another project, the Schriever-Habermohl flying disc, reportedly used 3 rotating impulse jets inside a 50-foot circular frame. Designed in Czechoslovakia, but never fully realized, it still fuels the mythology of Nazi Wunderwaffe. These visionary prototypes ultimately failed, sabotaged by unstable technology, wartime chaos, and a regime focused solely on weaponry. The dream died, but the mystery never did. Meanwhile, a hidden fortress elsewhere was supposed to provide an extra layer of defense for Hitler's collapsing empire. Number 11. The Wolfs Lair. The Wolfs Lair was more than a headquarters. It was a fortress buried in the trees. Known as the Wolfs Lair, this top-secret Nazi command center was carved into the dense forests of East Prussia, now Poland, hidden beneath layers of camouflage, concrete, and fear. Designed as Adolf Hitler's eastern stronghold, the complex was built to be invisible from above and impenetrable from the ground. At its core were dozens of massive concrete bunkers, some with walls over 6 feet thick, meant to withstand direct bomb hits. These weren't just shelters. They were packed with war rooms, communication hubs, and strategy centers. Entire sections were dedicated to air defense, power generation, and high-level coordination. Over 2,000 military personnel, guards, and officials lived and worked within its perimeter. Landmines, steel fences, and air defense systems made it a nearly untouchable stronghold, at least for a time. But by late 1944, as Soviet forces closed in, the once secret lair became a growing liability. With the front lines just miles away, the Germans made a calculated choice: destroy everything. Explosives were wired into the bunkers, and the retreating forces blew apart what they could to keep the Allies from uncovering its contents. What remains today is a shattered shell, crumbling walls, twisted steel, and moss-covered ruins. The Wolf's Lair may have been built to last 1,000 years, but war ensured it wouldn't survive the decade. Number 10. Xray Gustaf. Sometimes Nazi superweapons weren't abandoned because they failed, but because they were simply too massive to survive. Xray Gustaf, a German 80-centimeter railway cannon developed by Krupp in the late 1930s, was originally built with a singular goal: to crush the heavily fortified Maginot Line in France. At the time, it was the only weapon powerful enough to break through more than 22 feet of reinforced concrete or several feet of solid steel. This steel giant stretched over 170 feet, weighed around 1,350 tons, and could launch 7-ton shells nearly 30 miles. Its destructive force was unmatched, but ironically, by the time it was ready for combat, the Maginot Line had already been sidestepped. Instead, Gustaf saw action in 1942 during the Siege of Sevastopol, firing 47 massive shells before its barrel wore out. Yet its true burden lay in its logistics, requiring 2 parallel rail lines, thousands of support troops, and weeks of setup. Too big to move quickly and too exposed to protect, it became more of a liability than an asset. By April 1945, with Germany collapsing and Soviet forces closing in, the Germans destroyed Gustaf themselves. It became a symbol of over-engineered ambition, an artillery titan built for a battle that never came. Number 9. The Maus. The Panzerkampfwagen. 8 Maus was supposed to be the ultimate war machine, a towering symbol of Nazi engineering built to dominate the battlefield through sheer size and strength. Designed during the final phase of the Second World War, it became the heaviest fully enclosed tank ever made, stretching over 33 feet long and tipping the scales at more than 200 tons. It wasn't just a tank, it was a fortress on tracks. The idea was bold: create a nearly indestructible land cruiser that could crush enemy defenses and absorb any blow without flinching. But while its armor was nearly impenetrable, its practical flaws were impossible to ignore. The Maus was so heavy, it couldn't cross bridges without destroying them. Its oversized engine struggled to move its colossal frame, making it slow, unresponsive, and utterly impractical in fast-paced warfare. Even river crossings required an elaborate snorkel system, forcing the tank to submerge more than 25 feet underwater, a maneuver better suited for desperation than strategy. Only 2 prototypes were ever completed, one with a working turret and one without. Tests began in late 1944, but by 1945, Soviet forces had overrun the testing site and seized the project. The Maus never saw combat. Today, one rusting giant survives in a museum, A silent reminder that engineering ambition without battlefield utility leads only to failure. Number 8. DFS-346. The DFS-346 looked more like something from a sci-fi comic than a wartime blueprint. Shaped like a missile with razor-sharp wings, this experimental Nazi aircraft was designed to soar to extreme altitudes and break speed barriers once thought impossible. The plan was daring. The rocket-powered plane would be carried beneath a bomber, released mid-air, and then ignite its engine to streak across the sky faster than any fighter in existence. On paper, it promised a revolution in aviation, but reality hit hard. From its earliest tests, the DFS-346 revealed deep flaws: unstable aerodynamics, sluggish controls, and a tendency to stall at high speeds. Even the safety systems were unreliable. One early test left a pilot seriously injured when the seatbelt and seat failed under stress. After World War II, the Soviets seized the unfinished prototype and tried to bring the dream to life. By 1951, they managed a powered test flight. At 30,000 feet, pilot Zeiss pushed the aircraft past 560 mph, only for the controls to freeze. The plane drifted off course and started to fall. Zeiss had no choice but to eject using an escape capsule, barely surviving the ordeal. Though it never reached production, the DFS-346 became a cautionary tale, a sleek machine built to lead aviation into the future, yet grounded by its own ambition. It may have briefly touched the sky, but soon vanished into the fog of forgotten history. Meanwhile, among the shadows lies one of Nazi Germany's most obscure and unsettling experiments, hidden beneath layers of secrecy. Let's find out. Number 7. The Xray Weapon. Some Nazi projects blurred the line between science and science fiction, and none did so more eerily than the alleged Xray weapon developed under the guidance of Luftwaffe Colonel Schröder-Strön. Hidden deep in classified files, this so-called wonder weapon was believed to harness invisible radiation capable of destroying armored vehicles, grounding aircraft, and, according to some reports, even detecting oil or healing wounds. In the final months of the Second World War, when desperation replaced strategy, the SS approved its development. The idea was audacious. Built with rare and valuable metals, the device resembled a cannon, but instead of firing shells, it emitted a focused beam of radiation. A Geiger counter was reportedly used to measure its invisible output, which could supposedly be detected 25 meters away. No photographs exist. No sketches remain. Only cryptic descriptions in surviving records hint at its terrifying design. In March 1944, a test was allegedly conducted in a secluded quarry hidden within the Harz Mountains. If successful, the colonel had been promised unlimited support. Afterwards, the weapon was declared effective, but strangely, the project vanished. The SS unit was dissolved in October 1944, and the files were sealed. No explanation was ever offered. Whether it was a true technological breakthrough or wartime fantasy, this death beam remains one of Nazi Germany's most obscure and unsettling experiments, lost to secrecy, buried by silence, and remembered only as a whisper on the edge of possibility. Number 6. Crumblau, the corner-shot rifle that backfired. Among Nazi Germany's strangest wartime inventions, few matched the sheer oddity of the Crumblau, a curved barrel attachment designed to let soldiers fire their Sturmgewehr 44 rifle around corners. The idea was bold: increase cover, reduce exposure, and give troops in tanks or urban combat the upper hand. A built-in periscope sight allowed users to aim without revealing their heads, seemingly offering a clever edge on the battlefield. But theory clashed with physics. Forcing a bullet through a bent metal barrel introduced huge stress. Bullets fractured mid-flight, barrels cracked from pressure, and instead of a clean shot, the gun often delivered a chaotic scatter like a shotgun blast. That might sound useful in tight quarters, but it wasn't the precision fire engineers had envisioned. Several versions were produced, curved at 30 degrees, 45 degrees, and even 90 degrees. But all suffered from the same core flaw: instability. The 30 degrees variant lasted around 300 rounds, while sharper versions disintegrated after fewer than 160 shots. Attempts to relieve pressure using vent holes and protective shields failed to fix the fundamental issue. In the end, the Crumblau was abandoned. Even in an era marked by desperation and experimental weapons, this peculiar project proved more dangerous to its user than to the enemy. A strange footnote in Germany's pursuit of battlefield innovation. Number 5. Hortonho 229. The jet that looked too far ahead. It didn't just fly. It looked like it came straight from a distant future. The Hortonho 229, crafted by the visionary Horton brothers, was unlike anything else in the skies during the Second World War. Its sleek, tailless, flying wing design wasn't just for speed. It was a stealth concept, meant to reduce radar detection using a radar-absorbing shape and wooden components. Germany was desperate for a breakthrough, and this aircraft promised just that. But building a machine ahead of its time came with setbacks. The first unpowered glider flew smoothly in March 1944, proving the concept had wings, literally. But once the project passed into the hands of Gustaf Wagenfabrik for full development, momentum faltered. Engine shortages, rushed redesigns, and even possible sabotage crippled progress. The second prototype, powered by Jumo 004 turbojets, showed promise until its third flight. An engine fire caused the aircraft to spin out of control, killing test pilot Erwin Ziller. Still, Nazi command believed in its potential. The nearly completed third prototype, V3, stood on the edge of operational testing when American forces captured it in 1945, shipping it off for examination. Though the Ho 229 never saw combat, its radical design planted seeds for future stealth aircraft, reminding the world that visionary thinking sometimes arrives before the world is ready to handle it. Number 4. Complex Riese. Complex Riese shows that Nazi projects were sometimes stopped not by failure, but by a war that raced ahead of itself. Conceived in 1943 beneath Poland's rugged Owl Mountains, Riese, German for giant, was an audacious plan to hollow out the rock into a hidden headquarters of colossal halls and interlocking tunnels. At Osovka, Wodaj, and other sites, workers chiseled passageways 40 feet high, laying narrow-gauge rails and pouring thick concrete strong enough for vehicles, machine shop, perhaps even command bunkers. Nearly 6 miles of galleries took shape, lit by flickering lamps and echoing with drills, but progress slipped as steel and cement vanished to battlefronts and Allied bombers severed supply lines. By late 1944, Soviet armies were closing fast. In January 1945, the retreating Wehrmacht ordered everything left where it lay. Mixers froze in half-poured walls, wheelbarrows rusted on shattered tracks, and blueprints disappeared into briefcases carried west. No records clarify whether the labyrinth was meant for secret weapons, factories, or a final redoubt, only that it was never finished. Today, Complex Riese survives as a silent, dripping maze, concrete arches swallowed by darkness, rails leading nowhere, and a reminder that even the grandest wartime dreams can vanish before the mountain dust settles. Number 3. Nazi Robo Engineering. Among the most puzzling whispers of lost Nazi technology is the claim that humanoid machines, robotic figures with human-like frames, were secretly developed in the shadows of the Third Reich. While official history dismisses such creations as fiction, scattered fragments tell a different story. Deep within confiscated notes from Dr. Klaus Richter, Hitler's personal engineer, are diagrams that hint at designs far ahead of their time. Metallic limbs, articulated joints, and internal mechanisms suggesting a mechanical soldier. Decades later, photographs surfaced of 2 rust-covered figures buried in decay. One stands rigid, its design eerily similar to Richter's sketches. The other lies crumpled in overgrowth, its once polished form now a corroded mystery. Though no complete record confirms these machines were functional, their very existence raises serious questions about what Nazi scientists might have been pursuing in their final desperate experiments. Could these robots have been early steps toward autonomous weaponry, or something far stranger? For now, the trail ends in silence. The truth remains buried under secrecy, waiting to be unearthed by those willing to look beyond what we've always believed. Number 2. Brewster Buffalo. The Brewster Buffalo, one of the U.S. Navy's first monoplane fighters, was built to be the future of aerial combat, complete with a closed cockpit, retractable landing gear, and a hook designed for aircraft carrier landings. But what looked promising in theory quickly crumbled under the weight of real war. By the time it entered the skies in earnest, the Buffalo was already behind the curve. It was slow, heavy, and difficult to handle in tight turns, disastrous traits in a dogfight. In the Pacific, Japanese Zeros outmaneuvered it with ease. American and British pilots found themselves flying outdated machines in a fight that demanded speed, agility, and power. While nations like Britain, Belgium, and the Netherlands tried to squeeze value out of it, the results were underwhelming. Only Finland, operating in harsh northern skies against Soviet planes, reported any real success with the Buffalo. Still, its role in history wasn't meaningless. The Buffalo became a clear symbol of how fast warfare evolves, and how easily cutting-edge design can fall behind. In the end, its legacy was a lesson. In war, yesterday's innovation can quickly turn into today's liability. Number 1. Nazis lost nuclear ambition. At one point, Nazi Germany stood at the edge of unlocking one of the most terrifying forces in modern science: nuclear fission. With brilliant minds like Nobel Prize-winning physicist Werner Heisenberg leading what they called the Uranium Club, the dream of building an atomic bomb wasn't just fiction. Deep beneath a castle near Stuttgart, scientists hid an experimental reactor and uranium cubes, while secret shipments of heavy water, crucial for sustaining a chain reaction, were smuggled in from Norway. But the ambition far outpaced the execution. Unlike the United States Manhattan Project, which pooled thousands of experts under a single focused effort, Germany's nuclear program was disjointed, spread across labs with little coordination or shared knowledge. The fractured leadership, lack of clear objectives, and severe wartime shortages made progress nearly impossible. By 1945, as Allied forces advanced and cities crumbled, Operation Alsos uncovered evidence of the Nazi nuclear pursuit, but also its failures. German reactors never reached criticality, and uranium enrichment fell short. Hitler's hope for an atomic wonder weapon died in stone cellars and shattered labs, overtaken by chaos, miscalculations, and time. What could have changed the course of history vanished into dust and defeat. So, what do you think? Could the outcome of the Second World War have shifted if these Nazi projects were completed? We'd like to hear your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.